Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are clearing the decks. We are taking a concept that is so ingrained in our collective psyche, so fundamental to how we operate, and we are going to dismantle it.
We're putting the very idea of competence on trial.
It's a bit of a demolition job, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. We're looking at an idea that feels safe, it feels comfortable, and frankly, it's the operating system for most of the world. And that idea is good.
Good. It's such a nice word. We're told from kindergarten that good is the goal. Be a good student, get a good job.
Build a good life.
Exactly. But the source material we are covering today, Jim Collins' massive research project, Good to Great, starts with a premise that is, honestly, it's kind of rude. It grabs you by the throat on page 1. It says, good is the enemy of great.
It is a slap in the face, and it's really important to clarify what Collins means here. He isn't saying that bad is the enemy of great.
No, that's obvious.
Of course, if you're failing, if you're bleeding cash, if your product is terrible, you know you have a problem. You have an existential crisis that forces you to change.
Right. If the house is on fire, you run. You don't need a management consultant to tell you to grab the fire extinguisher.
Precisely. The danger, the real trap, is competence. It's what he calls the comfort of competence. If you have a good school, you don't really push for a great one.
You don't.
If you have a good quarterly return, you don't feel the pressure to overhaul your entire business model. Collins argues that the vast majority of companies never become great precisely because they became good.
Or they just settle.
They settle. They settle into the zone of good enough, and they stay there until they slowly die or, just fade into total irrelevance.
It's the gravity well of mediocrity. And I think that applies to people just as much as it does to corporations. How many people do you know who stay in a good job for 20 years, maybe a little miserable but comfortable, and miss out on a truly great career?
Oh, it's the exact same physics. So our mission today is to break down the physics of how you escape that gravity well. And we aren't just looking at anecdotes here. That's the key. We are looking at a specific set of data, a 5-year research odyssey that Collins and his team conducted to answer one burning question.
Which was?
Can a good company actually become a great one? And if so, is there a map?
And the answer, thankfully, is yes. But the map looks nothing like what you'd expect.
Not at all.
It's not about charismatic leaders. It's not about cutting-edge technology. And it's not about having some perfect 50-page strategy document.
No, the map is actually quite boring on the surface, but it's radical in its application.
Okay, so before we unfurl that map, we have to look at the origin story.
Yeah.
Because this entire project didn't start with a brilliant hypothesis.
No.
It started with an insult.
It really did. So you have to set the scene. It's 1996. Jim Collins is already a big deal in the business world. He had previously co-authored a book called Built to Last, which was a massive bestseller.
A huge book.
Huge. And that book looked at these visionary companies, Disney, Merck, Walmart companies that were practically born with a halo over their heads.
The icons.
Yeah.
The ones that felt like they were great from the moment the founder unlocked the doors for the first time.
Right. So Collins is at this dinner with Bill Meehan, who is a top thought leader at McKinsey & Company, a pretty high-stakes dinner. And Meehan leans across the table and basically says, Jim, we love Built to Last. It's a fun read. You did a good job. But unfortunately...
Oh, no.
It is useless.
Useless. That is a word that has to haunt authors. You spend years of your life writing a book, and the smartest guy in the room just calls it useless.
It cuts deep. But Meehan's logic was absolutely sound, and Collins had to admit it. Meehan said, look, the companies you wrote about were always great. They had these visionary founders like Walt Disney or David Packard. Their DNA was sent from day one.
So they never had to do the hard work.
They never had to do the hard work of becoming great. They just were.
And that's the key distinction, isn't it? Meehan asks the real question. What about the rest of us? What about the vast majority of companies that wake up at age 30 or 40, look in the mirror, and realize we're average.
We're good.
We're good. We have baggage. We have mediocrity kind of built into our bones. Meehan was really asking, is the disease of just being good incurable?
And that question terrified Collins because he realized he didn't know the answer. He realized that Built to Last was just a study of genetic anomalies. It didn't help the average company, the one that wasn't born with a silver spoon.
So what did he do?
Well, being an academic at heart, he didn't just guess. He assembled a research team and launched what they affectionately called the Death March of Financial Analysis.
I love that phrase, Death March.
Yeah.
It really emphasizes the sheer scale of this thing.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want anecdotal evidence. They didn't want to just pick a few successful companies and say, hey, look what they did. They wanted empirical, undeniable proof.
That's right. They started with 4,435 companies, basically the entire Fortune 500 from 1965 to 1995.
A massive data set.
And they were looking for a needle in a haystack. They needed a very specific, incredibly rigorous pattern to identify a company that had truly made the leap from good to great.
Okay, let's break down that pattern, because this is the filter that gave us the companies we're going to talk about today. This wasn't subjective. This was just math.
Pure math. The criteria were, number one, the company had to have 15 years of cumulative stock returns that were at or below the general market. So basically 15 years of being completely average.
A C student for a decade and a half.
Exactly. That establishes the baseline. They weren't born great, they were decidedly good.
Okay, so that's the first 15 years. Then what?
Then they had to hit a distinct transition point. A specific moment in time where the trajectory clearly changed. And after that point, they had to generate cumulative returns at least 3 times the market for the next 15 years.
3 times the market. Just to put that in perspective for everyone, let's talk about the so-called stars of that era.
Good point. During that same period, a portfolio of the marquee companies, we're talking 3M, Boeing, GE, Coca-Cola, the absolute titans of industry, they only beat the market by about 2.5 times.
So Collins was looking for obscure, average companies that suddenly woke up and started outperforming the biggest, most iconic businesses in history.
That's exactly what they were looking for. And they needed that 15-year duration on both sides of the transition point to filter out the one-hit wonders.
Right, the flashes in the pan.
Exactly. Any CEO can pump a stock for 3 years. You can slash R&D. You can fire a bunch of people, sell off assets, and make the numbers look fantastic for a cycle. Wall Street will love you for a minute. But you cannot fake 15 years of sustained market-beating performance. That requires a fundamental structural change in how the company operates.
So after this death march of analysis, starting with nearly 1,500 companies, how many actually survived this brutal filter?
11.
Just 11. That is such a tiny number. That's less than 1%.
It shows you how rare this transformation actually is. And the list. Well, it's not exactly the list you'd come up with if you were just guessing the greatest companies of all time.
No, it's a pretty dowdy group, actually. We are not talking about glamorous tech startups.
Not at all. You have companies like Abbott Laboratories, Circuit City, Fannie Mae, Gillette, Kimberly-Clark, Kroger, Nucor, Philip Morris, Pitney Bowes, Walgreens, and Wells Fargo.
I mean, some of those are shocking.
Yeah.
Fannie Mae beating GE, Walgreens beating Intel. It just sounds absurd when you say it out loud. Walgreens is a drugstore.
It is a drugstore, but the data is undeniable. Take Walgreens. For 40 years, it was just a completely average company. It tracked the market almost perfectly. Then in 1975, something shifted.
The transition point.
That was their transition point. From 1975 to 2000, Walgreens it climbed. If you had invested $1 in Walgreens, it would have beaten $1 invested in Intel by nearly 2 times. It beat Coca-Cola by nearly 8 times.
That is absolutely staggering.
It is, and it proves the premise of the research. You don't need to be in a sexy, high-growth industry to become a great company. You can be in steel, you can be in groceries, you can be in, drugstores. The vehicle doesn't matter. The physics of how you drive it matters.
Now, here is the most critical part of the whole methodology, and I think this is what separates good to great from pretty much every other business book ever written. They didn't just study the 11 winners.
Right. This is the black box concept, and it is crucial. If you only study the winners, you fall into something called survivorship bias.
Explain that.
You might find traits that everyone has, winners and losers alike. For example, if you study Olympic gold medalists, you'll find they all have coaches. But if you then go study the athletes who didn't win gold, well, guess what? They have coaches too. So having a coach isn't the thing that separates them. It's not the differentiator.
Okay, so to avoid that bias, they used a control group.
A very specific control group. They paired each of the 11 good to great companies with a comparison company. This was a company in the exact same industry, with the exact same resources and opportunities at the exact same time, but one that failed to make the leap.
So you're not comparing apples to oranges. You're comparing Walgreens to Eckerd. You're comparing Kimberly-Clark to Scott Paper.
Precisely. They looked for what was different inside that black box between good results and great results. It was all about turning on the light bulbs inside the box to see what the winners did that the losers didn't.
Okay, so before we get to what they did find, what was inside the box, we have to talk about what they didn't find. because there were some dogs that did not bark, some really big myths that got completely busted by the data.
This was, I think, shocking even to the researchers. They went in expecting certain things to matter, and the data just flat out didn't support it.
Let's run through a few of these because they're big. First up, the idea of the celebrity leader.
This is a huge one. We have this cultural narrative that to save a company, you need to hire a larger-than-life savior from the outside, a celebrity CEO with a big name.
A rock star.
A rock star CEO. The data showed a negative correlation. 10 of the 11 good to great CEOs came from inside the company. They were homegrown.
Wow. And the comparison companies, the ones that failed to make the leap.
They tried hiring outside saviors 6 times more often.
And it just didn't work.
It didn't work. The outsider often launches a flashy revolution, creates a ton of chaos, but fails to build sustainable greatness.
Okay, busted myth number 2, executive compensation. This one surely ruffles some feathers in the C-suite.
Oh, absolutely. We talk so much about stock options and huge salaries as the key motivators for performance. Collins' team found no systematic pattern linking high executive pay to the leap from good to great.
So the way they were paid just didn't matter.
The structure of the pay didn't matter. The amount of the pay didn't matter. There was no link.
That is wild. You'd think paying for performance would be the key to getting performance.
It turns out the right people will perform regardless of the incentive structure, but we'll definitely get to that in a bit.
Okay, what about strategy or technology? Everyone is always chasing the next big tech wave.
Also not the differentiator. Strategy didn't separate the winners from the losers. Both groups had strategies. And technology, it's an accelerator. It can accelerate a transformation, but it cannot cause it.
And finally, mergers and acquisitions. The classic let's grow by buying people strategy.
Total myth. The research was blunt. 2 mediocrities joined together never make one great company. It just doesn't happen.
So if it's not celebrity CEOs, it's not money, it's not some secret strategy document, and it's not buying your competitors.
Yeah.
What is it? Let's unpack the first major finding from inside that black box. Level 5 leadership.
To really understand level 5 leadership, we have to tell the story of the anti-hero of the study, a man named Darwin Smith.
Darwin Smith, CEO of Kimberly-Clark. Now, when I picture a CEO who beat the market by 4 times and completely crushed Procter & Gamble, I picture, a shark, a smooth-talking executive.
Darwin Smith was an in-house lawyer. He was mild-mannered. He wore these nerdy black-rimmed glasses. The book says he looked like a farm boy wearing his first suit. In fact, one of the directors on the board actually pulled him aside when he got the job and told him he wasn't really qualified for it.
Wow. Talk about a confidence booster on day one.
Right. And his personal life wasn't what you'd expect either. He spent his vacations on his Wisconsin farm, digging holes with a backhoe.
Digging holes.
Moving rocks from one place to another. That was his idea of a good time.
And there's a really tragic but also inspiring element to his story too, right?
There is. 2 months after becoming CEO, he was diagnosed with nose and throat cancer. The doctors told him he had less than a year to live.
My heavens, that's devastating.
But Smith, he had this ferocious, quiet resolve. He told the board, I'm not dead yet. He started commuting from Wisconsin to Houston for radiation therapy weekly while still working full-time as the CEO.
Unbelievable.
And he lived for another 25 years.
And in that time, he made what has to be one of the gutsiest, most audacious decisions in corporate history.
The decision to sell the mills, you have to understand, Kimberly-Clark was a paper company. They made coated paper. They owned mills. That was their entire identity. It was their history.
But Darwin Smith looked at the brutal facts of the economics, right?
He did. He saw that the coated paper business was just bad economics. It was mediocre at best. And he reasoned that if they were to jump with both feet into the consumer paper product business tissues, diapers, they would be forced to compete with the absolute best in the world, Procter & Gamble.
And he thought that was a good thing.
He thought it was the only way to become great. So he sold the mills. He even sold the namesake mill in Kimberly, Wisconsin.
He literally sold the company's hometown history.
He sold the history to buy the future. He took all that money and funneled it into consumer brands like Huggies and Kleenex to go head-to-head with P&G.
How did Wall Street react to this?
They absolutely hated it. The stock was downgraded. The business media called it a stupid, foolish move. But Smith never wavered, and the result. Kimberly-Clark eventually beat P&G in 6 out of 8 product categories and owned their other rival, Scott Paper, outright.
So this story, this anti-hero, brings us to the definition of level 5 leadership. because Darwin Smith isn't what we usually think of when we picture a great leader. He wasn't charismatic in that traditional sense.
No. The term level 5 refers to the top of a 5-level hierarchy of executive capabilities. And the defining characteristic is a paradox. It's a strange duality.
What's the duality?
It is a blend of extreme personal humility and intense professional will.
Humility and will. Two things you wouldn't necessarily expect to go together.
Exactly. They are incredibly ambitious, but their ambition is for the company, for the cause, not for themselves. They want the company to win. They don't care if they get the credit. In fact, most of them would prefer not to.
Let's contrast that with the leaders of the comparison companies. The study calls them the level 4 leaders, which is a nice way of saying.
The gargantuan egos.
Right. And a perfect example is Al Dunlap at Scott Paper, Kimberly Clark's direct competitor.
Oh, Al Dunlap. They called him Rambo in pinstripes. He came in, slashed R&D, fired thousands of people, hyped the stock, sold the company to Kimberly Clark.
And pocketed $100 million for about a year's worth of work.
Exactly. He got rich, but the company ceased to exist as an independent entity. He built his own wealth, not the company's enduring greatness.
Or another example is Lee Iacocca at Chrysler.
A classic case. He did save the company, which was a remarkable achievement, but then he became obsessed with his own fame. The talk shows, the autobiography, the TV commercials.
I am chairman of Chrysler Corporation always.
It was all about him. And after he left, Chrysler fell right back behind the market. It wasn't built to last.
It's so telling.
It is. The level 5s are the exact opposite. They are fanatically driven to set their successors up for even greater success. They want the company to be even better after they leave. The comparison leaders, the level 4s, often set their successors up for failure. Because what better proof of your own greatness than the place falling apart the second you walk out the door?
There's a really useful metaphor the book uses to describe the day-to-day behavior of these level 5 leaders. It's called the window and the mirror.
This is a key behavioral pattern they found over and over again. When things are going well, when the company hits a big success, level 5 leaders instinctively look out the window.
Right.
They credit other people, they credit the team, they credit external factors, they even credit luck. Joseph Coleman of Philip Morris literally wrote a book called I'm a Lucky Guy to explain his incredible success.
That's humility right there. So what happens when things go poorly? When they make a mistake?
Then they look in the mirror, they blame themselves, they take full responsibility. I should have seen this coming. I made a bad decision. It's always on them.
And the comparison leaders, the level 4s with the big egos, they do the exact opposite.
The exact opposite. When they succeed, they look in the mirror and preen, I am a genius. Look what I did. And when they fail, they look out the window and blame bad luck or the market or their incompetent employees. It's never their fault.
So you have this level 5 leader. They are humble, but ferociously driven.
Yeah.
What is the very first thing they do? Conventional wisdom says they get everyone in a room and set a new vision, right? A new strategy for the future.
That's what we all assume. But the data shows that's completely wrong.
And this leads us to the second massive concept. First, who? Then what?
This is maybe the most famous, most sticky concept from the entire book. It's the bus analogy.
Okay, break it down for us.
The idea is this. You don't start by deciding where to drive the bus and then try to get people to help you get there. You start by getting the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus, and only then do you figure out where to drive it.
This feels so counterintuitive.
Yeah.
We're taught from day one that leadership is all about vision.
But vision is fragile if you don't have the right team to execute it or to change it when the world changes. Collins identifies 3 simple truths here. 1, it's much easier to change direction if the people on the bus are there because of who else is on the bus, not because of the destination.
They're there for each other.
Exactly. The second truth. The right people don't need to be motivated or managed tightly. They're self-motivated by the inner drive to produce the best results.
And the third truth.
Great vision without great people is completely irrelevant.
Okay, let's look at a case study that makes this crystal clear. Wells Fargo versus Bank of America. This was during the deregulation of the banking industry in the 80s, a time of massive, unpredictable chaos.
Right. Dick Cooley, the CEO of Wells Fargo, knew that massive change was coming, but he was humble enough to admit he didn't know how it would look. He didn't have a crystal ball.
So he didn't create a detailed 5-year plan.
No. His strategy wasn't a specific business plan. His strategy was simply to inject an endless stream of talent into the company.
So he just hired great people, even if he didn't have a specific job for them at that moment.
Exactly. He hired outstanding people whenever and wherever he found them. And the result was this legendary management team they called the Whiz Kids. Nearly every single one of them went on to become a CEO in another major company later in their career.
So when the storm of deregulation finally hit,
They were flexible enough, smart enough to handle it perfectly because they had the brain power on the bus to adapt to anything.
and what was happening over at Bank of America?
They used the weak generals, strong lieutenants model.
That sounds less than ideal.
It meant the top leader was the strong general, and he wanted weak lieutenants who would just follow orders. The managers were described as plastic people just waiting for instructions.
A culture of yes, ma'am.
A total culture of it. The climate was no conflict, no debate, just wait to see which way the wind is blowing.
And when the storm hit them.
The result was they lost billions of dollars, they fell way behind, and eventually they had to hire executives from Wells Fargo to come in and fix the mess.
That genius with 1,000 helpers model is just so dangerous. We saw it with Eckerd versus Walgreens too, didn't we?
A perfect example. Jack Eckerd was a genius. He could walk a street corner and just know if it was a perfect location for a new store. He had the magic touch.
But the problem is,
When he left the company to go into politics, the company fell apart. The 1,000 helpers didn't have the genius to guide them anymore.
now contrast that with Cork Walgreen.
Cork Walgreen was a level 5 leader. He wasn't the store-picking genius. His genius was in building a team of geniuses. He built the best executive team in the industry, and as a result, Walgreens beat the market by 15 times.
Now, I want to clarify something here. When we say first two, it sounds very nice and friendly. But Collins is extremely specific that this isn't about being soft, it's about being incredibly rigorous.
Rigorous, not ruthless. There is a huge, huge difference.
Can you define that difference for us?
Ruthless is hacking people apart. It's mass layoffs to save a quarter without any thought. It's firing people capriciously. Rigorous is consistently applying exacting standards at all times and at all levels, especially at the top.
And the research gives us 3 practical disciplines for how to apply this rigor.
Yes. Practical discipline number 1. When in doubt, don't hire, keep looking. The great companies were willing to leave a seat empty rather than fill it with the wrong person.
This is Packard's law, right? From David Packard of HP.
Exactly. He argued that a company's revenue growth cannot outpace its ability to get enough of the right people to implement that growth.
Okay, discipline number 2. When you know you need to make a people change, act.
This is probably the hardest one for many of us. It's tough.
Yeah.
But Colin gives a great heuristic. He says the moment you feel the need to tightly manage someone, you've probably made a hiring mistake. The right people don't need to be managed that way.
And waiting to make that change is unfair to the right people on the bus, isn't it? They end up having to compensate for the wrong person.
It's incredibly unfair. The book talks about churning better, not more. The good to great companies didn't necessarily fire more people than the comparison companies. They just fired the wrong people faster and worked like hell to keep the right people.
Okay, and the third practical discipline. Put your best people on your biggest opportunities, not your biggest problems.
This is so counterintuitive. The normal management thinking is, if we have a big, ugly problem, we send our best fixer to go solve it.
But the good to great companies don't do that.
No. The best example from the book is Philip Morris. In the 1960s, they moved their number 1 executive, a guy named George Weissman, to run their tiny international division. It was only 1% of the company's revenue.
People probably thought he was being put out to pasture.
Everyone thought he was being demoted. But the leadership saw a huge opportunity in the international market, and Weissman went on to turn Marlboro into the world's best-selling cigarette.
While the comparison companies were doing what?
The comparison companies tended to put their best people on fixing their biggest problems, which only leads to, at best, a portfolio of well-managed mediocrities. You don't get greatness from solving problems, you get it from capturing opportunities.
There's a really lovely note in the research about the personal side of this first 2 principle. It's not just a business strategy. It leads to a better life.
It really does. The executives in these companies talked about their work with such joy. Working with people you genuinely love and respect makes the work itself enjoyable, no matter how severe the challenges are.
I think the Philip Morris executives described their time together as a love affair.
They did. That's the kind of environment First Two creates.
Okay, so let's recap. We have a level 5 leader at the helm. They have gotten the right people on the bus. Now we have to look at the environment they operate in. This brings us to the next major principle. Confront the brutal facts, yet never lose face.
This section of the book opens with a powerful concept called the Stockdale paradox.
Named after Admiral Jim Stockdale, the American prisoner of war.
That's right. Jim Stockdale was the highest-ranking U.S. military officer in the infamous Hanoi Hilton POW camp during the Vietnam War. He was imprisoned there for 8 years, tortured over 20 times.
Just an unimaginable ordeal. Yeah. And Collins got to interview him and asked him a profound question. Who are the ones who didn't make it out?
And Stockdale's answer is shocking. He said, oh, that's easy, the optimists.
The optimists. That sounds completely wrong. Aren't we supposed to be optimistic to survive something like that?
That's what you'd think. But Stockdale explained. The optimists were the ones who said, we're going to be out by Christmas. And Christmas would come and Christmas would go. Then they'd say, we'll be out by Easter. And Easter would come and Easter would go. And eventually...
They died of a broken heart.
They died of a broken heart.
So what was Stockdale's approach? How did he survive?
It was a duality. This is the paradox. You must retain an unwavering faith that you will prevail in the end, regardless of the difficulties, and at the same time, you must confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be.
That is the paradox. You have to have absolute faith that you will win, but you cannot blind yourself to the grim reality of the struggle you're in.
And the Good to Great companies embodied this paradox perfectly. The research found they didn't have better information than their competitors. They just couldn't ignore the information they had. They were better at confronting the brutal facts.
The case study here that just drives this home is the story of Kroger versus A&P in the grocery business.
No, this is a classic corporate tragedy. Both were old-school grocery giants heading into the 1970s. And the world was changing. The traditional grocery store was dying, and the superstore was the future.
So let's talk about A&P first. They were run like a hermit kingdom, right?
Run by a man named Ralph Burger, whose entire goal was to preserve Grandpa's way, the way the founding Hartford brothers had done things. He was resistant to change.
But they knew it was happening. They even ran an experiment.
They did. They opened an experimental store called the Golden Key. It was a modern superstore, and it was wildly successful. It proved customers wanted this new format.
So they had the answer right there in their own data.
And this is the tragedy, the denial. The executives at headquarters didn't like the answer the data gave them, so they shut down the successful experiment. They doubled down on the old model and launched a scorched earth price war instead.
Unbelievable. And Kroger?
Kroger ran similar experiments. They saw the exact same data. The old grocery store format is extinct. It's a dead man walking.
And their reaction?
The action. They accepted the brutal truth. They made the decision to systematically turn their entire system upside down, store by store, city by city, getting rid of the old and building the new.
And the result?
The result is that today Kroger is the #1 grocery chain in America, and A&P dwindled into a shadow of its former self and eventually went bankrupt.
There's a really interesting point here about charisma. We usually think of a charismatic leader as a huge asset. But in this context, when you're trying to confront brutal facts, it can actually be a liability.
It can be a huge liability because a leader's charisma can act as a filter that prevents the truth from getting through. People don't want to bring bad news to the magnetic, inspiring leader.
The example given is Winston Churchill, of all people.
Exactly. Churchill knew his own personality was domineering. He knew people would be afraid to tell him the unvarnished truth.
So he engineered a workaround for his own charisma.
He did. He created a special unit called the Statistical Office that was completely outside the normal chain of command. Its only job was to feed him raw, unfiltered facts on the war effort, no matter how grim. He said he slept soundly at night, not because he was an optimist, but because he knew the facts. He had facts, not dreams.
So if you're a leader, or even just working within a team, how do you create a climate where the truth is actually heard? Collins gives us 4 practical mechanisms.
Mechanism number 1, lead with questions, not answers. Start by assuming you don't know everything.
The book talks about Alan Wurtzel from Circuit City, who would ask questions like a prosecutor or a bulldog, not to manipulate or blame people, but to genuinely understand.
Yes, and for a level 5 leader, saying, I don't know, isn't a sign of weakness. It's the valid starting point for finding the best possible answer.
Okay, mechanism number 2, engage in dialogue and debate, not coercion.
The meetings at Nucor, the steel company, were legendary. There were screaming matches, veins bulging in people's foreheads, violent debates.
That sounds incredibly stressful.
But the goal wasn't personal. The goal was to find the best answer for the company. It wasn't about getting everyone to buy in to the CEO's preordained view. It was a search for truth.
Mechanism 3. Conduct autopsies without blame.
A great example is when Philip Morris acquired 7UP and it turned into a complete disaster.
Instead of firing people and pointing fingers, what did the CEO, Joe Coleman, do?
He wrote a detailed 5-page analysis of why he was wrong, why he had made a mistake in the acquisition. There was no finger pointing at anyone else. That creates a culture where people aren't afraid to try things and fail.
And finally, mechanism number 4. Build red flag mechanisms.
This is about creating a system that forces you to see the data, to see the brutal facts, even when you don't want to. It allows information to bypass all the normal filters and demand attention.
The example here is from a company called Granite or Rock and their short pay policy.
It's brilliant. Any customer who isn't happy with their invoice can just circle an item they're unhappy with and deduct the cost from their payment. They don't have to ask permission or make a phone call. It forces management to see every single failure immediately and directly.
So let's put it all together. We have level 5 leadership. First, who, then what, and confront the brutal facts. These are the first 3 big chunks of the good to great framework.
And if you look at them together, you see they form the foundation. You have the driver, which is the level 5 leader. You have the team, the who on the bus. And you have the climate of truth, which is confronting the facts.
Before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier when we were talking about Stockdale, the hardiness factor.
Yes. This is a crucial output of confronting the brutal facts. It doesn't make you weak or demoralized. It makes you incredibly resilient.
When P&G attacked Scott Paper, what do?
They basically gave up. They sold out to Kimberly-Clark.
And when P&G attacked Kimberly-Clark?
The executives at Kimberly-Clark held a moment of silence for P&G, not out of fear, but out of the sheer thrill of going up against the best. They were hardened and ready for the fight precisely because they had faced their own brutal realities.
So as we close out, we're left with what Collins refers to as the physics of greatness.
He argues that these principles, level 5, first who, brutal facts, they aren't just business strategies for a particular economic era. They are timeless physics of organized human performance.
The engineering might change. The economy changes, technology changes, but the underlying physics remain constant.
That's the core idea. The flow is always the same. 1, level 5 leadership is the driver. 2, first who gets the team right. 3, confront brutal facts creates the climate for truth to prevail.
I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought, a challenge, really, based on that mirror and window concept we discussed.
It's a challenge we can all practice in our own lives, starting tomorrow.
The next time you succeed, you land that big client, you get the promotion, you finish a difficult project, will you instinctively look out the window and credit others? And the next time you fail or make a mistake, will you have the discipline to look in the mirror? That simple habit might just be the seed of level 5 leadership in your own life.
It's a powerful place to start that journey from good to great.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.